find something new.
A few weeks back, Dan and I reconnected with Diana. Diana is a systems architect, software engineer, author, speaker, and learning facilitator. She is neurodivergent, a friend to doggos, and a voracious reader of snarky sci-fi novels. It's a tree now for all of us was one of a handful of mixed and otherwise metaphors that came about in Dan and my reflection conversation with Diana. We also had the pleasure of meeting her cat, Alita. Diana also shared more about what has become of her practice in working with groups and other collaborators, expressing awe for the forest that came from those scary little seeds. 3 years later, the three of us were so glad we took the time to reflect and recognize the growth that continues to come from our work together. As usual, the conversation centered on these questions. When and how did we meet? What have we worked on together? What were the whats that found their way in our work together? And what difference has that made for each of us? We hope you find listening in on this reflection conversation helpful in furthering your practice working with groups. Thanks.
Well, it's great to finally catch up. I think we inevitably will sort of link maybe in our minds to speaking to Andrew yesterday and some of the experiences that we shared with you all together. But like, yeah, we're hot off the tail of that conversation with Andrew yesterday, talking about books and being a speaker and how the stuff that we did together way back when at DDD Europe has kind of filtered into all of our lives and become maybe part of the way we think about things. So that might be one of the things we reflect on. But we heard that you've been doing a book. Now, where's your book is
Yeah, so
now?
came out 8 months ago.
Yeah.
And I'm actually starting on the next one already. Because I apparently love suffering is the basic gist of that. But yeah, there was a lot of things then that I was ready to start exploring, but this industry is not, it's so funny because it's a very startup culture, but it really isn't great for leaps of faith and culture changes because the culture is very homogeneous, like in a way, like it's kind of a paradox how inventive it is and at the same time how challenging it can be to really do something different, to introduce change, especially experiential change. But I think for both Andrew and I, we hadn't really done anything together then when we met you, and it has been an incredible adventure since then. Both wrote books, we've done talks together, we started kind of other things, we expanded the social group, but also really decided that this bringing these types of experiences is really the only thing that helps people think differently or have different experiences. That both had focused a lot on what we were trying to say, and that was sort of a pivot point of focusing even more on creating experiences so other people are kind of taking that leap. The next year at the same conference, we decided to do a role-playing game where everybody was an architect at a new company, and when they came in, it was like a murder mystery party. You know, you got your little envelope, and you had to kind of go through the game and then present what to do. And it was so fun. It was so, and we had like 7 speakers play the non-player character roles and discover that it's full of good actors. Tech is full of improv people, like you wouldn't even know. Annika, one of the organizers for DDD, she played the role of editor-in-chief of this international publication, and she was so good.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. That's great.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? Like I made her a script, but then she just kind of improved it. So it's really an interesting power of architecting a space and an experience
Mm-hmm.
along with the usual kind of talking and building, and those things are all really, really important too, but we don't get by doubt through those things.
Mm.
We only know that from experience, right?
Yeah.
And that's harder. It's harder
Yeah.
to design.
Yeah. That sort of makes me think back and to see if I remember right when we first met, because we would have met over email, right, getting connected, and then a first, like online meeting. And I sort of remember that you had your doubts coming in
Oh,
of
well, that is a delightful and delicious understatement. I was like, oh no, no, absolutely not. Like for me, and I'm sure I'm not alone with this, and especially because I don't look like the other people that do my job, right? And so often there's a process to go through
Mm.
every single time I get on stage, and I've done a lot of speaking and training and workshops since we met. And I did it for 20 years before, but I
Right.
do it with more frequency now.
Okay.
And there's always that guy, always, that I don't know what I'm talking about, like derisive and awful.
Mm-hmm.
And that's cool because it doesn't have to be for everyone. Doesn't really help me unless they can help me understand how it isn't for them,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that helps. But even with that, I was on a journey. In writing the book, I had the same resistance. It's a little bit better on stage, but doing innovative kinds of workshops and really building community, which is something I'm also doing now, building a community for people that are designing systems. And I really had so much resistance and concern because it's not an easy environment to do that in, especially if you feel sensitive to the criticism that is pretty stabby.
Mm-hmm.
But recently, on the website that describes my book,
Okay.
I put reader reviews, and I have some really helpful reviews that that like the book but also explain why or what they got from it, so people can discern if it's for them. And then the last review says, it's from Goodreads, says worst tech related book ever. And I feel really good about that because I'm like, because that's part of it too. That's part of it. It's also kind of a signal. Also, it's harder to write the worst tech related book ever than the best one, I think. I mean, that's quite an achievement.
Yeah.
The two of you bring this real, a depth and thoughtfulness to creating space and relationships. Like, so because systems are my thing and designing systems, relationships produce effect. This we know, right? Relationships design the system. It's how the parts talk or don't talk to each other. The software parts interact, and it's how the people interact. It's how the teams, if product hates tech and tech hates product, that architects the system. That's what you'll see in the code. That's what you'll see in the outcome. But there's a real discernment of practices that go into shifting structure and pattern in thinking and in people, so that it's enough of a shift so they really can explore thinking differently or experiencing differently, but not so much of a shift that they just fall through it, and not so little a shift that it keeps anybody who doesn't want to have that experience in control of it. And so I really hadn't thought about kind of the art and science of that until I had that experience with the two of you. And I'm just like, I love that you're trying to bring more of that knowledge, because it's a real blind spot. Certainly is for me, but I think for most of us, we just figure we know. We're all social people. We know how to be social, but that's It's not the
Right.
same.
Hmm.
Yeah. I think I'm thinking, Mike, to the conversations we've had about this style of engaging with an audience in conferences, and we talked with Jane and with Andrew, and both of those conversations we sort of touched on the role of identity for the people on the stage, but I think maybe also the people in the audience and what the shift is there that everyone's playing a role in the standard conference culture of expert on stage, listener in the audience, person on stage knows what got the answers. You want to get the answers, so you're just trying to extract that information from them. And I think Mike and I like to play with other dynamics,
Hmm.
and it sounds like maybe you were experiencing some of that in that DDD keynote, because what I seem to remember happening was like the spotlight wasn't so much on you as subject matter experts all the time, and there was space and room to breathe, and we could participate in a way that was more equitable, I suppose, with the people in the room. So uh, and it seemed to go off okay. I remember hearing later on that from Matthias or maybe Annika that, oh yeah, there was a couple of people who just really weren't into it and they just had to leave.
Hmm.
But I don't think our worst fears ever played out, that were like we were just going to be met with stony silence or like a refusal to engage with these instructions. And it was a joy, really, I think, to go, phew, it's
Yeah.
working at this kind of
Yeah.
scale.
Hmm.
Yeah, so
And
it's fun.
that playing with identity, that has stayed and increasingly become a core um, spot of investigation for me since then, because there is something about um, there's a sort of a process of self-validation as well when you're the speaker on stage with
Yeah.
that knowledge.
Hmm.
But fortunately, I get to work in these increasingly complex and difficult situations and face difficult challenges. And I would hold everyone back if I was the most knowledgeable person in the room, right? It is the synthesizing of the knowledge and expertise that's the
Hmm.
real benefit, right? The real value.
Hmm.
And so that ability to synthesize, to generate, cultivate, and synthesize knowledge flow and sharing in a
Hmm.
space, increasingly I see that as the leadership skill.
Hmm.
It like the managing part, like having the next book is about knowledge flow and the difference. Like we value knowledge stock, which is how much I know or I can look up
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
demonstrate.
Mm,
But in systems, everything is about knowledge flow. I mean, I would argue in the universe, and where everything is about the flow of knowledge and the
Hmm.
mm,
ability to generate um, the share, the right information at the right time and the right circumstances,
Hmm.
and
mhm,
where there's always an active element for
Hmm.
everyone has consented in knowledge flow. There's
Hmm.
no passive being entertained, and there's no being the entertainer.
mm,
Hmm.
Except sometimes that's fun. I mean, sometimes it's fun to give a presentation that's entertaining to people. That's not a bad thing at all, or
Hmm.
enlightening or instructive,
Hmm.
but it isn't the uptake,
Right.
right? That we're not really learning and adapting. So combining those things
Hmm.
um, really comes with challenging identity. And
Yeah.
increasingly now, if I give a keynote that's really, really important to me, I notice that I don't have that ego after the either I feel completely depressed because I think it was terrible, or I feel like a rock star because I'm gonna mix metaphors, hit a home run, so I feel like a rock star.
mm,
Like I don't have either of those. It just is, I just feel connected.
Hmm.
mm.
Mm. You're there as you, right? Not necessarily an other persona.
Right.
Um, because I remember we would talk about, um, right, it's a performance, um, in some ways. And yet, as we get deeper into the preparation and knowing all the steps, or honoring things. Like I remember specifically you and Andrew and Gayatri were like, you want us to synthesize what in a minute?
In real time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was sort of
500
like,
answers.
well, yeah, okay, well, let's figure out what we can ask you so it's
Right.
reasonable and you can
Mm.
be comfortable with what you find, right? So we kind of found that natural prompt, right? It was something like, what is something that caught your attention, right? Or, like something like that, right? Like just something that is minimal. You had some minutes to go through it, right? And you could be you and be balanced and confident and comfortable in the space. I
Yeah.
guess the other thing, just circling back to another part that you talked about being you and comfortable on stage, those moments, Dan, you mentioned earlier, like a few minutes ago, that idea of those breaks where each of you could kind of like hang out and chat with each other, right? And just kind of
Mhm.
get out of speaker mode, right?
Yeah. Take a
In
breath.
that
Yeah.
case, right? And so it kind of just takes it off of everybody. The same where the audience is doing some work for a little bit and they're sort of on stage, if you will, right?
Hmm.
And then they get to like sit back and take it in, right? So everybody's going through this like effort together to get to knowledge so it can flow together, right? And something can happen next. And I know what Andrew had shared with us was like all of that content along with right his blog post kind of became the bolus of the book proposal for him too. So it was kind of
Yeah,
a fulcrum.
and for me, it's I've now had the experience on both sides. So I got to thoroughly enjoy. I can synthesize this information a lot faster than I thought I could. I'm good at picking up these patterns,
Yeah.
right? And so that was not a concern in the moment that it was before,
Yeah.
right? I thought it would be overwhelming, but it wasn't at all.
Yeah.
And so now, because I'm doing the same thing in my workshops where I'm asking people to do a thing
Mm-hmm.
that they tend to balk at because they think, but
Mm-hmm.
let's just try.
Mm-hmm.
And I get so much more from the people in the workshops than I ever could have imagined. The ideas that they're generating, and we're looking at some really tough things. Like I use the example that the 2022 study said that still 92% of software engineers worldwide are male. And then the joke is, no, you're right, it's not 92%, it's 91.88%. It's a little bit less. And then we use the iceberg model, so a common systems modeling tool,
Sure.
to model how would we design a system like that? If we wanted that to be the outcome, what would be the structures and patterns and mental models? And I thought, no one's going to do this. And if they do that, like I just thought, oh my, no, everyone's gonna balk. And in fact, I've learned so much about um, things I wasn't even looking at because I don't know the answer to that. I don't think anybody really does.
Mm-hmm.
But even when we do a fictitious company and then we do architectural exercises around this company and people are coming up with recommendations for this company, every workshop, someone comes up with something never occurred to me before.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds like it kind of really ramped up the exploration of how participation and the kinds of participation, right, that you're creating a lot of knowledge in the process of doing your workshops and work is really unlocking some different levels for yourself, but also potentially people that are there.
Yeah, and the speed, because that was,
Mm-hmm.
you had mentioned about, that it seemed too hard to do what we had signed up to do. But
Mm-hmm.
the fact that hard was actually good for thinking,
Mm-hmm.
because you can't over control it. I have a stream of hundreds and hundreds of people responding to your questions, right?
Yeah.
I can't control that situation. I just need to experience it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I discover that when people are in a situation where they can't have a right answer, they can't possibly keep it in a small enough box that
Mm-hmm.
the information is specifically overwhelming, but you can still do a lot with it that's more beneficial than a slower, more rote kind of experience, because then we go slower and more rote and we don't get as much intuitive knowing, I think. We don't want to do this all the time.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
Slow and rote is good sometimes, but for new experiences, I think your approach and your trust in the approach, because your feeling was, well, we'll handle it. If it doesn't go well, we'll handle it. And that's become my approach now. Like I had to be very well prepared as a speaker, as a trainer, and I still am very well prepared, because that will always be, because I really like that. But we were incredibly well prepared. But the prepared was more about space than control. And the more that I've experienced that, the more I discover we literally get more learning out of it. Like whether I like it or not is secondary to the fact that it's more effective.
Yeah.
I wonder how much time we spent talking about what was really only 5 minutes of the design, and then you look back and you realize that you spent like at least an hour or 2 hours just talking about how will we get in and out of this, what's actually going to happen moment by moment, so you can sort of live it through in your mind and then go, and if that doesn't work, what will we do instead? So I think that's what you're saying, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And trusting that you're just going to be present for whatever happens, right? I mean, if the room had completely balked and nobody wants to do it, sometimes that happens. Sometimes that happens, right? That's what's there. It's never actually happened. Like that concern for me is, as I've done it, never actually had to face it.
Yeah.
But you figure it out, and that I just give a talk with a wonderful speaking partner for QCon, and same, we spent 3 months preparing for this talk, and 2.5 months were just modeling the experiences that we're going to frame with people to show some things that will help. And so the structure of the talk itself was only really 25% of the work, but people experienced that background story. And sort of my last thought with this is, it funny because it came up last time talking to, I think Andrew was part of the conversation, people talking about acting, and well, acting is this or that. I can't remember exactly what they said. And I'm like, no, actually, for me, because that was my first, when I went to university the first time, theater, I was a theater major, and that it is only this, is that it's not performance. It's performance a little bit, and then it has to stop being performance. And then it has to be something that you're fully embodied, that you're fully there with, that you're saying what you're saying, but you're being what you're being. And that if you can't get there, the audience will always experience the distance. And if you do get there, it doesn't matter if you make mistakes or whatever, because you're connected. They're with you. You're doing this together. And
that I connect with that a lot.
Good speaking.
Yeah. I think I just, in terms of even like, if I think of the arc of our relationship together, right, in doing that work together and how it came together on the day, it was sort of our collective trust in the process, the belief, the understanding of it, the support we had for each other, that made it a welcoming, trusting enough space to accomplish what happened. And as Dan, I know, has often said, like, that experience really helped us, because that was like, we were like, maybe it dropped a seedling in the dirt to see what might come of this. And it really was like, oh, we should probably water this, and we need to tend the ground around it. And what were the patterns that allowed us to come together in that way, that helped be prepared, and like, how did that work, that it really, became what became the design aspects, the 16 design aspects, and the conversations we had, and the prompts and questions that we asked, that became the book of prompts that are evolving into another version yet again.
And the
as
way we work
speak.
with groups, I think the way
Yeah.
we work with other groups to design, to co-design something like that
Mhm.
in an organization, or to coach a group when we're maybe not delivering, but we will be with them at a cadence meeting, every week to talk about how things are evolving, and then this artifact takes shape, which is the design of the thing, and
Right.
talk. Yeah, the conversations we had with you informed all of that stuff that we do now. So
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. And I'm
Okay.
glad too, because you're describing every great team I've ever worked on as well, right? Anytime we've made real change, it has these same qualities.
Mhm.
And I know you run into the same thing of, wait, no, just give us the 10 steps to do a perfect, presentation, or 10, but that this willingness to architect the experience,
Mhm.
right? And by this, I don't mean, just the concrete steps, but to actually understand the system, the social system you're going into, understanding the needs, playing with that, trying to create the space for something to emerge. The more people have that experience and they know what it gives them, the easier it is for us to offer that experience, right? But for the people who've never had it, they're like, that's a waste of time. And it so isn't. It's worth every minute for what you get out of it.
Right. Well, and that's kind of at the root of that optionality of all of it, right? That idea of if you'd like to participate, it's happening right now. And if you don't, there are alternatives to what you can do. From you welcome to get up and go, and you're welcome to just be and notice. And I remember the power of that option, Dan, that you created then too. That just again just made a space that just says sort of anything goes here, right? No pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Socrates, the open spaces have become my new favorite thing. I'm so nourished by that, especially the one in Germany. And that's a big tenet there, is that there's plenty of options of things to do. If something's not for you, then go find something that is. And if you're facilitating, it's okay if people leave. They're taking care of themselves. Like this isn't about control over attention. It's about the investment of attention.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I have another meeting that I have to go to.
We're at time.
Yeah.
Which is a little sad, because this is really nice. I'm very glad. Thank you so much for setting this up. I hadn't stopped to think about how that is a tree now. And it's a tree for all of us. Like, it really, I hadn't stopped to think about the forest that came out of those scary little seeds.
Yeah.
That's a lovely thought. Thanks for bringing that home.
So
Diana.
thank you for setting this up. I'm really glad to have stopped and thought about this.
We are too.
Yay.
Yeah.
Yay that.
Yeah. I just got some little shivers there. Thanks for that. Little goosebumps.
All right.
Awesome. All right, Diana.
Great. So I hope to see you again soon. Do stay in touch. And
absolutely.
I'm so excited for all the stuff you guys are doing. I really am. Like, I remain the number 1 fan. I will not give up that role.
Awesome.
Really paid up member.
Lifetime.
Okay.
Subscription.
Yeah.
Take care. Talk to you soon.
All right.
See you, Diana. Bye-bye.